Welcome, my friends. I'm here with someone who is quite impressive, and I can briefly introduce him, but I'm excited to hear him tell his own story and introduce himself. But if you look on his Twitter page, he is an Ironman triathlete, a marathon runner, a coach, and he's someone who's gone through a total transformation, mind, body, and perhaps spirit as well. So I'm happy to introduce to you guys my new friend, Matt Izzo, which thankfully, I've said this a couple times already that the Twitter algorithms have brought together some really cool people, and I'm really blessed that we've been introduced somehow. Thank you, algorithm. But Matt, it's good to see you, man. You're a first time guest on the Local Listens podcast. So we have the ritual first question for first time guest. When did you start to speak your truth?
It was pretty recently, I think. It was in these last few years. I don't know. Maybe I'm still not speaking my truth yet. I think there's layers to it. So there's always more to peel back with it.
Nice, man. I always love asking people that because some people will flat out just be like, "Oh, I've always spoke it," and you were modest and humble enough to be like, "Well, it's a work in progress," and I think that's crucial to understand. Like, I feel the same exact. Like, I always feel like I'm going back and fixing things that I may have, um, like I've made mistaken beliefs or I've like believed things that I really thought were true, and then you have to go back and correct yourself. But yeah, it's awesome, man, and I want you to enlighten me a bit because I've heard about your journey in taking control of your personal health, and I want to go back for a second and think about the origin of the issue in general because anyone who looks at health holistically has to look at the root causes. And do you agree? Do you have any insights or feedback on the idea that when people become sick and obese and they feel sluggish and their energy is depleted, it's kind of a product of an evil group of corporations that have worked together to provide something in a perfectly marketed fashion where people believe that it's totally fine. There's not going to be any consequences, but of course there are consequences. So, what is your relationship to that? And what do you think about the nefarious structure that has made a lot of people sick and not feeling so top tier?
Yeah, well, like most things, right? They're energetically aligned. So the people who are, engaging in eating food from this, right? This is what they want, right? So it's just kind of a cycle, and obviously kind of driven by capitalism. That's going to be the fuel is to make money off that. But it doesn't have to be that way because fortunately, living here in the United States of America, we can live a healthy lifestyle. It's crazy the amount of healthy choices we have, and we can eat better than kings would, from hundreds of years ago, right? And we could just do that going down to the local Kroger, right, and picking up groceries. So it's really all about the choices that an individual makes because there's many people who function in this same environment and don't make these choices and they don't suffer the consequences of making those choices.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring this up that we can eat like kings and queens because like the irony there is that this was I don't want to call myself a victim, but I fell for it. I was dating a vegan woman and I was even vegan before that and I kind of destroyed my overall wellness over time. I mean, I felt great in the beginning, but it's ironic to think about it because we were eating like peasants and we thought we were feeling royal and all that, but really like it was once, and we have since broken up and we've both like dove into like the carnivore diet, like the total opposite and things like that. And we thought about it and we're like, wow, like we would have been such a healthier couple if we had our hormones were all fixed and our diet was adjusted well, because we weren't eating like kings at all. We were eating like peasants. And there's a maybe some people would disagree with that, but there's something interesting about animal foods and how they are such a nourishing piece of our human existence that if you take them away, it changes you completely. And I wanted to ask you, in terms of energy, How would you describe, like, I'm not sure how long this journey has been for you, but you publicly put on your Twitter profile that you've lost like over 70 pounds, which is incredible. And you've posted the before and after pictures,
Mm-hmm.
and that requires a lot of grit and determination, discipline, consistency. But like, what do you remember about feeling like you had to make some kind of change? Like, what was some memory where you decided like, all right, this is enough. I've absolutely had it. I got to do something different.
Yeah, so I've actually lost the same 75 pounds three times over the course of my life, right? So
Nice.
I would I would lose the weight and gain it back again, as is so often the case, right?
Mm, go through a cycle.
But the thing that changed it for me, it was in 2016, and I finally kind of came to the end of my rope. And it was a gradual thing. It wasn't like there was one rock bottom moment. I could have gone much lower, and that was part of my reason for wanting to change was I didn't want to go lower, but it certainly would have been possible. Um, it was 2016, and I had just had enough of the lifestyle I was living. I had made incremental changes leading up to that. I had started walking 10,000 steps every day, and I did that for 2.5 years, which was great. It was a great habit, got me outside, and all the benefits of walking every day. It didn't lose a lot of weight, and on some level, I knew this. I had lost weight before, so I understood what it took to lose weight. I did not think that I could lose weight and keep it off. So it seemed like it would just be a waste of time. It's a lot of sacrifice and energy goes into losing a large amount of weight, and not thinking that I'd be able to sustain that. It wasn't worth it. It was, why would I do that? I'll just go down to the bar and have another beer, right, and just not worry about it.
Mm.
But it was a morning in September of 2016, and I couldn't sleep, and I was out for a walk right when the sun was coming up, and I challenged myself to run a mile. It was a marked trail out behind my apartment. So I was like, you know what? I haven't run in a few years. Let me see. I could. Let me see what I got. So I walked out to the 1 mile mark, and I just turned around and I started running. And I ran back to my apartment. I didn't time myself or anything. I'm sure it was super slow. And somehow I managed to run the whole mile. I had been walking a lot, and so I was in decent enough cardiovascular shape. So on the one hand, I felt great, like, hey, I set this challenge for myself, and I pushed myself and I achieved it. But on the other hand, I felt pretty shameful because I'm 34 years old, and it shouldn't be that hard to run a mile, right? It was indicative of a problem. So I decided right then and there I'm going to lose weight, and that's when it all changed for me. And ever since then, I've really worked just toward a different goal in my life.
Nice, man. Yeah, it's always good to recognize, that gift, that instant reward that you can feel after exercise. Those endorphins are wonderful. And then they self perpetuate themselves. Like you started with walking, which I love walking. I do that every day after working my 9 to 5. But then like, that is a baby step and it leads to the next. And I want to give your friend Matt from Born Again Men. So this is a cool podcast that you had sent to
Yeah.
me. Not only did you talk about this fitness and health journey, but you also got into the competitive racing that you've been doing. So like imagine, starting back in 2016 where running one single mile was considered a big deal, and then you went into much more than that. But I appreciate that. And the last thing about that episode, which I think we'll gradually move towards, is that you guys then dove into chat GPT and consciousness and spirituality. So I would like to kind of wrap all of that together and basically as a broad overview, because I'm sure when you go on podcast, you tell this story a lot. So I want to frame it perhaps potentially in a unique way that maybe will help you think about it differently. So really quick, just let people know what kind of competitive races have you been involved with, so we can just set the groundwork for this next question.
Triathlons and running, so endurance races. So I've done an Ironman and a marathon as the longest races so far.
So when you tell people about triathlons and the Ironman race, like how many miles are we talking? Like how far is this?
Yeah, so triathlons can be all different lengths, and I've done triathlons of all different lengths. Some of them can actually be pretty short, like an hour race. But a
Mm.
full distance Ironman is 140.6 miles, so it's a 2.4 mile swim followed by a 112-mile bike ride, and then a 26.2 mile run.
That's intense. Yeah. So just gonna go out on a quick limb here, but that Ironman race, that was probably like one of the most challenging things you've ever done, right? Was that like up there with that?
The race itself wasn't. It
Yeah.
was the training for the race
All the
that
preparation.
was. So
Yeah.
like the first ever triathlon I did, I was woefully underprepared for, and in some ways I felt a lot more anxiety before that, even though it was much shorter. I just based upon where I was at, it was more of a challenge. But for the Ironman race day itself, I knew what I was getting into. You
Mm.
know it's going to be a long day. I worked really hard to make sure I was properly prepared. It was really about 3 years of training kind of went into this. So I lined up for this race with full confidence. Obviously it's a long race. I think 16% of people didn't finish it. So
Wow.
it's a challenging race even for the qualified athletes. You can suffer a bike problem and just have your race end, right?
That would
So
ruin your entire
um,
day right there.
it,
Yeah.
it ruins 9 months of work, right?
Right.
So
Yeah. All the
so so
training.
so so there's always just this little level of anxiety, those kind of like act of God sort of things. But I was lined up and I was fully confident, and I will say that that race was one of the most fun experiences of my life.
That's great, man. Yeah, so that's kind of the nature of what I want to get at here. Like, are you familiar with Joseph Campbell and the Hero's Journey circuit?
I am not.
Okay, so it's really cool because, well, it could be the hero's journey, which is a cycle that every story has where, the hero leaves their familiar, comfortable home and they go
Mhm.
out and they face many trials. And think of like a clock, and then they get to 3 o'clock and they're out in this unfamiliar landscape, and then they hit 6 o'clock and they have like the climax, like they maybe they're close to being killed, or they're facing this dragon, or some huge challenge that really pushes them. And then as they cycle back from 7 o'clock back up to 12 o'clock, they're coming they're coming back to their initial first state, that home base, and they're bringing this powerful gift with them that they acquired, like this treasure that they were able to retrieve from defeating this dragon, proverbially. So there's something else to that though, because Joseph Campbell, as an anthropologist, would think about initiation. And that's really what I want to center on today, is that, you know, in an ideal society, going through the trials of curing someone's illness and getting back to a healthy state, a healthy weight, etc. Ideally that would never need to be happening, because society would push people towards the best possible health and wellness routines and things like that. But the truth is that that's just not the way our modern society is. Like you said, it's set up to profit off of people at the expense of their health at certain points. But for initiation, if we're thinking about cycles of initiation, it usually starts with ripping someone away from that familiar, almost maternal feeling, and then forcing them into some experience that turns a boy into a full grown man. And I'm curious, a big part of this process is having mentors. So when you think about this journey that you've been on, whether it's getting back into shape or training for these races, and then subsequently having this business where you can help others make that same change. Who are some of the mentors and influences that have really helped you on this path of yours?
Yeah, so I never really had a formal mentor, right? Or at least somebody I've had a relationship with that I would consider them to be a mentor. I think what's really helped me out a lot is social media and the internet, right?
Mm.
Because it can be such a powerful force. Everybody likes to say social media is bad. Well, no, social media is an amplifier, right? So if you use it for good, it amplifies good. So it's allowed me to connect with people, really over the last, I'll say, 25 years, because I was a 16-year-old kid and I was fat and I had no idea how to lose weight, right? The knowledge just wasn't there. The
Mm.
internet didn't exist in the way that it does now, right? Maybe you go to the library and get a book out or something, or you buy a fitness magazine, right? So it's really changed my life, and just being able to follow certain people, and they show you how to do it. So um, I when I lost weight the second time in my 20s, it was really, I was involved in a forum called Johnstone Fitness,
Hmm.
and he was a guy who lost weight. And this was so long ago that it was a novelty that he actually took a picture of himself every day, right? This was a big deal. He had an early digital camera, so he would take a picture of himself every day, and he posted like a 90-day
All the
transformation,
progress.
and
Yeah.
everybody was like, "That couldn't be. That you can't do that, right? You started at the end, and you got fat again, and just crazy stuff." And this was a real novelty at the time, but the picture is worth 1,000 words, right? It illustrates that from day to day you're going to look about the same, right? No 2 days are you really going to look all that different, but when you stack them up in a row, when you're consistent, then you can see a great change, right? And he built a forum, back in the day before Twitter, right? You would join these like internet forums and stuff, and
Right.
you would have like a handle on it, and you make friends on these forums, and you'd find people who were interested in stuff. And I educated myself about fitness and nutrition, right? Just from what I learned there. And those people were in a lot of ways mentors to me. I didn't even know them for sure, and then it kind of kept happening. I knew all that in my 30s when I lost weight again. Another one I would say that was a big deal for me was David Goggins. And
Yes.
I listened to his book Can't Hurt Me in the spring of 2019, and then in August 2019 I did Olympic length triathlon. Without having any background in any of those sports. So you hear these people speak to you, right? And they show you an example. So this is what I try to do with my social media is, lead by example. Talk is cheap. You can try to give people advice and they're not going to listen to you. You have to show them. And, just the great thing about, we'll say, Twitter is you can document the process. So
Absolutely.
you don't just see the achievement. You don't just see the picture of the guy with a medal around his neck and you're like, oh, wow, look at that, right? What an achievement. Like, no, you see every day, right? If they document what they're doing, you see how they get from point A to point B. And the hive mind is able to just grow at such an accelerated rate. So everybody I'm following on Twitter is people who are positive influences on me. Right. It's just, I want to be programmed with your message. So my current mentors are going to be all the people that I'm following on Twitter for the most part. So you can just check that out because these are the people who I look to, who I either have a mutual relationship with, or I, just find so much value in the stuff that they talk about. So, this is, I think, in many ways democratize this, because for a long time certain people might not have had access to these mentors and these brilliant minds like you do now you can just read the thoughts of and actually communicate back and forth with these other brilliant people, and you can really just level up, right? On Twitter we're always one tweet away from chatting with Elon Musk, right? Who's the richest, most powerful man in the world, and that happens every day on that, right? So it's such a paradigm shift for the way humans can communicate and interact, that it's a powerful thing, and I try to leverage it as much as I can, both teaching and learning.
Nice, man. Yeah, there's so much that you can be learning at any given time. You just gotta scroll a little bit, maybe start a couple conversations. You'd be surprised who you'd run into. And I don't even remember how we were connected on these Twitter algorithms, but I'm glad that we were connected because not only are you posting your process and your day-to-day commitment to this lifestyle, but it is cool that you've produced a couple things that people can use for themselves. And I want to get into that in a second, but when we think about how we are driven to commit to something like this, some kind of program, it's like some people say when they become parents, I'm single, I don't have kids, but they would say like the moment they became a father or a mother, they would instantly change their entire life. Their whole perspective had shifted drastically. And, that's speaking to some kind of like profound shift, maybe even a spiritual shift. And I always like thinking about the fact that if I eat junk food like one time, like if I go out and celebrate someone's birthday, like I'm gonna be all right. Like it's not gonna be like a big deal. I'm gonna recover. But if I make it a consistent habit every day, it's gonna like slowly deteriorate something inside of me. And that's something that I'm referring to is like the spiritual awareness that you develop by being clean and having a well functioning system through and through. So I'm curious. I want to ask you, when you're developing discipline and you're making these changes, do you ever notice that you feel more spiritually connected when you're feeling healthier? And like, how would you describe your work with clients and people that you've helped? Because that's interesting that you've taken your experience, and now you're helping others benefit from the same rigor that you put yourself through, to inspire others to do the same. I think it's pretty badass. So, when you think about spirituality and how you can benefit from your innate spiritual gifts by taking care of yourself. It seems like very simple, but at the same time, it's easily forgotten when we're not feeling good and we're not feeling great. So, how have you feel like you've helped other people and helped yourself become more aware of their true gifts, their true inner gifts?
Yeah, so my personal health focus, it's not on longevity, it's
Mm,
on generating energy because, healthy humans tend to live between 80 and 100 years, and that's pretty obvious at this point. So
mm.
if you think you're going to cheat death, you're probably mistaken unless you
Enjoy
want
it
to
while
get
you're
your
here.
consciousness locked into some sort of
Oh, no
computer
thanks.
or something
Nah.
like that, right? You're going to have a finite time here on this earth, and it can end for any of us at any moment, right? So I think once you kind of come to terms with that, it makes more sense to say, all right, well, I'm going to focus on how can I generate the most energy, right? The old like lifespan versus health span, right? How can I
Mm,
generate the most energy to make the most out of my experience here? And a lot of the habits that generate energy obviously overlap with longevity too, right? Eating healthy foods, exercise, good sleep, all this stuff, right? It just makes sense from a standpoint of generating energy. And there's different forms of energy, right? You can talk about the 3D physical energy, or the 4D kind of intellectual energy, or the 5D sort of spiritual energy. And a lot of the people that I work with tend to be low energy, right? I was low energy, and they're disconnected from spirit. They're disconnected really from intellect in a lot of ways. That they sort
mm.
of people behave in unconscious behavior patterns, right? They might be called NPCs as a term by certain people, right?
Right, right.
But we're just not conscious. We're not thinking, right?
Mm.
We've been disconnected, and our physical health also, is in poor health, right? It's deteriorated from all the bad food choices and stuff, and this stuff all kind of works together. So what can we do to change this, right? Well, you want to generate more energy. If you're in a low energy state, you're in a low emotional state, those are going to be synonymous. So you want to generate more energy. The easy way to do that is by making simple health improvements, right? Because these will literally have your cells, your mitochondria are going to make more energy, and you're going to feel better, right? More energy is going to mean an improved emotional state. Over time, this is going to make your life better. So, what can you do to improve your energy, right? You can eat more nutritious foods, you can hydrate properly, you can go out in the sun, you can sleep well, you can exercise, right? The sort of fundamental pillars, and not get bogged down on all the details. I call it the boulders, not pebbles approach.
Yes.
You want to worry about the boulders, the big things that matter, not the pebbles. So a lot of people get stuck arguing and wasting a lot of energy on the
You're splitting
pebbles,
hairs. Yeah.
and that stuff has some value, right? But only if you've got these pillars kind of locked in, right?
Right.
If you're in a low energy state, you don't have a lot of energy to spend on this. So you have to make sure you're focusing it appropriately and making sure that the things you're doing are going to actually move the needle in terms of your health. And this is an easy way to increase your energy, and then it's going to open you up to connect to even larger sources of energy, right? In terms of we'll say spiritual energy. There's different energy available to all of us. For example, you'd say someone like Gandhi was probably not. He probably did not have a lot of physical energy, given his stature, but he was obviously connected to some incredible spiritual energy that allowed him to defeat the British Empire, right? So there are different forms of energy available, but I would say the average person who struggled with their weight and their health is going to feel really disconnected from their body because it's
Mm.
it's It's going to feel uncomfortable to be in your body. It's going to hurt. I know it. I've been there, right? You kind of disassociate with it, and you think your mind is who you are, and this body
Mm.
just kind of lugs your brain around. And the holistic answer is to reconnect, and reintegrate your mind, body, and spirit, into a cohesive integration that can function optimally and give you energy from all the different sources that are available to us.
Right on, man. Yeah, the phrase that comes to my like I think about this idea that we have to embody our spirituality. And it's kind of funny because some people have said, and I don't know where they get this information from, but they would say like we only use 10% of our total brain power. And I'd say maybe that's true, or maybe if you're eating the standard American diet and you're sedentary, you only have access to 10%. And at our baseline, our functioning, normal, healthy homeostasis, we have much more available to us, and that makes life more enjoyable. Your creativity will be boosted in a number of different ways. And I want to ask you about so coaching is one thing that you've been doing, and it's cool that you take this holistic approach and that you are helping people become more energized, because I know that's basically my primary marker. If I don't feel energized doing something, I know that it's either because I don't care about it too much or that it's just not fulfilling me in some kind of manner. So I gotta approach it differently. And when I do feel energized, it's the perfect crystal clear marker that this is really working and I should do more of this. And it's really cool, just like we were talking about earlier. You go on daily walks and you're like, wow, this makes me feel pretty energized. I'm going to do this again tomorrow. And you keep on doing it and you compound those behaviors, and all of a sudden, you've never felt better, and now you have the energy to do even greater feats like run and to do distance. And it's crazy to hear that the Ironman is over 140 miles total. That's pretty wild, my friend. But I want to I want to ask you this. Something really cool that you had shared a while back that I spotted on your profile was a list of influential books, and you had brought this up earlier that when you were younger, the access to information wasn't so readily available. I mean, people could look up David Goggins really easily and find, this crazy retired Navy SEAL who's like running a shit ton, getting people hyped up, and it's available anywhere. You can access his information. You could access people like Jocko Willink. There's never been a better time to find this information, but at the same time, there's something special about investing your time into reading a book and really diving into it. So there's a couple here. I'm gonna read just these first four that you had brought up, and whichever one stands out to you the most, I'd love for you to comment on what you've gotten out of it. Maybe why other people might want to check it out, and things that you've pulled out from it. So it's Levels of Energy by Dodson, Letting Go and Power versus Force by Hawkins, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, which I've talked about in a previous episode. That was kind of funny. And then Becoming Supernatural by Dr. Dispenza. So which one stands out to you at the current moment that you want to speak more on, that as a influential text that you've dove into?
Yeah, I would say it was Levels of Energy by Frederick Dodson, but only because really I read that before any of Hawkins' work. There's a lot of overlap between the sort of thing Dodson and Hawkins talk about. But that was a really paradigm shift for me into how I saw my entire world, right? And to kind of how you want, it puts a whole different perspective on how I understood how the world worked, and it explained reality to me in a different way. And obviously, it's just a model, right? These are just models. Our language is imprecise and insufficient to really properly describe these things, because in many ways they're talking about an intelligence greater than our own. So our minds can't really comprehend it, and our language certainly isn't able to describe it. But when you find a model that works for you and that resonates with you and helps you understand how the universe works, and this is a pretty simple thing to test, because you can just you have all these experiences in your life, and you can just apply the model to all the things that you've seen and done and experienced in the past, and say, okay, this makes sense, or no, this doesn't make sense. And just the entire concept of energy, I touched on a bit, right? When I was fat, I felt really disassociated from my body, and it's our bodies that feel energy, right?
Mm.
It's like like a sixth sense. But when
Yes.
you're disassociated from your body, you don't feel those things, right? I shut myself off from emotions as a
Yeah,
coping
comfortably
mechanism.
numb.
Exactly, and then you're left with only your mind and your logical reasoning faculties and your analytical skills. And our minds are great for certain things, comparing things with fixed number of variables. Our minds are great at that stuff, right? But when it comes to these larger sort of questions, well, our minds aren't so good at that anymore. And that's when you need to learn how to turn your mind off and listen to you know kind of feel the energy, and again, it's not something that can even really be appropriately described
Sounds like
because
a flow state too.
it's a flow state, and that's how you really want to live your life is in this flow state. So what that's kind of what these books, and there's a lot of overlap between them, and it really illustrates that there's more there that your five senses don't perceive, and you can test this. One of the interesting things I got is I got one of those EMF meters, right?
Nice.
And I can walk around my house and I can use it to measure all these fields of radio waves that are here in my space, but my senses can't, you know, pick up these things, right?
Mm.
I don't have the sense in my body that can detect.
Just like Wi-Fi, like you would never see
Yeah,
it, but it's
exactly, but
floating
it's
around there.
there, and this machine can detect it, and it shows you that, right? So I can't see it, hear it, taste it, feel it, touch it, smell it, whatever, but it's there. So if that's there, well, what else might be there that I can't, pick up with
Right. Yeah,
my,
yeah.
five senses? So it really opened up sort of a whole new perspective for me, and I think you have to be at a certain point in order to you have to have an open mindedness to
Mm.
be able to shift your entire view of the world around you, right? That's a hard place to get to, but if you're at that place, then I think it makes sense to explore some of these things, these core beliefs that we may have that may, I don't want to say they're wrong, because most truths are relative truths, right? So
Mm.
from a given perspective or level of consciousness, this may in fact be the truth, right? But from a higher one or a different one, well, this truth might not be true anymore, right? So it's good to have an open mind and be willing to consider things differently.
Well said, my friend. Well said. And the key word that I want to pull out is paradigm, because our paradigms, perhaps culturally, paradigms have been shifting a ton. I mean, even just if we pinpoint like from 2016 to 2023, like paradigm shift has been absurdly rapid and complex. And you had briefly mentioned in the beginning that you started speaking your truth recently. This is a great place to flesh it out, because I've been very open about what I think, and the challenges that I've been facing. Um, and I thought I was gonna get fired because I was like openly against mandates and things like this, and never happened. Thankfully, I was able to speak my piece. But I want to ask you, however recent or far back you want to go to, like what are some major paradigm shifts? Like maybe not necessarily health related, they could be, but how have you began to see this existence and this overall landscape that we're in much different ways? Were there like certain events, certain things that you've learned, just like you had referenced in this book, levels of energy, like what are some other ways that your paradigm has been shifting quite a lot?
Yeah, so I've really gotten interested in the sort of spiritual side of things, but at the same time, I think it's important that we all appreciate that we are humans here to live a human experience, right?
Yes.
So just because you can take this sort of zoomed out approach on things and understand it from a different perspective,
Mm.
that doesn't mean it serves you to take on that perspective at all times. And
Right.
I like to think of it like a really immersive video game or a movie, and ideally when you're playing a really immersive video game or you're watching a great movie, you forget that you were there and just, sitting on a sofa staring at a piece of glass that's changing colors, right? You forget that that's a relative truth. That's what you're doing. But from the perspective you're in at the moment, this is your space, right? This is where you are. And that is what we're here for. We're here to be humans living a human experience. So we can zoom out and say, okay, I am not my thoughts, and this isn't really me here on earth doing these things, right? But again, I'm here as a human right now, incarnated on earth to live as a human. So this is in some way my larger overall mission. And then okay, well, how do I succeed in my mission? And it's obviously to help other people, right? And to
Yes.
help, advance humanity and consciousness, right? Through the actions that we do here to help others. And that's obviously, I think, what it's all about for all of us.
Yeah, man. I was just talking to someone recently about Terrence McKenna, and he had this really cool quote about, if you can make someone else's existence just a little bit better, that's worth whatever trouble you would go through to make it happen. And I appreciate that you've placed a great emphasis on being of service in particular ways. And what was your experience when you first started coaching people, and you moved into that you know obviously, like, we're both lifelong students, we're going to be learning forever, but once you started teaching others, how was that transition for you?
It was pretty comfortable because I have been in management at my jobs for about 15 years, and I worked at some pretty dire jobs. But the one thing that I really came to appreciate was working with the employees, right? And especially if someone new comes in and they just have good energy and they're interested, and you get to watch them and see them and help them, right? And then even if they end up moving on to a new job, right, you can feel like, hey, I helped this person on their journey, it may have given me a problem here at work, but I've helped them out, and good for them. So for me, it's really just kind of an extension of that. So helping people is easy from that regard. What I tried to do was, I figured all this out myself for the most part, right? And if I could have hired a coach to teach me the things that I teach, right, at age 20, it would have, advanced me so far, right? But that didn't exist back then. So I had to figure it out through trial and error, because this sort of thing didn't exist back then, right? But now you have access to somebody who's been through the same thing you have and overcome those same problems you've overcome, right? And they've gone back and I had to go back and reverse engineer what I did, because I did not follow an optimal path, right? I did not take a straight line from point A to point B. So I had to say, okay, now that I can look back at the totality of my journey, what were the key things, and how could I have done it differently, right? And how could I have consolidated, these things, right? Because it took me years between like the physical transformation, the mental transformation, the spiritual kind of thing. And it's like, all right, maybe I could speed this timeline up, and kind of teach all these things in concert, and so you can get a really sort of robust education in 12 or 24 weeks, right? And it doesn't take you 25 years to figure it out. Obviously, you can't cover the 100% detail, but you can get to 95% of it, right? You can get to all the major points, and that can be tremendously beneficial for an individual to receive that information, right? Not just for those 12 weeks, all right? Maybe you have a good 12 weeks and you lose 25 pounds, and that's great, right? Maybe you have some struggles, right? You're starting from a place of low energy. Maybe you only lose 8-10 pounds, which is still great, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the information you learn, if you consistently apply it, it will compound over time. So, what you learn in 12 weeks can pay dividends for the rest of your life, right? So in some ways, it's really an asymmetrical investment, because you can hire a coach who can solve this problem for you, and then you can just kind of put it past you, and now you know how to do it. And this is applicable to all sorts of things, right? This is why coaching is so valuable. People teach you how to start an internet business, or
Nice. Yeah.
all this kind of stuff, because they've done it. Just learn from them
Mm.
and put your pride aside a little bit and your ego aside, and just listen and learn. And I think a lot of people, they'll feel like they're not worth the investment. It's not that the coach isn't worth the investment, that they themselves aren't worth the investment. And I had another podcast recently where somebody said, like, what would you tell someone to hire you? And it's like, well, I can't convince you to do this. If you're ready to do this, then I'm here to help you, right? But
Right.
it has to start with you. And at the end of the day, we have to become our own best coaches. Because you can hire a coach, you can hire the best coach in the world. But if you don't listen to them, it's not going to help you. You have to be accountable to yourself at the end of the day. And if you understand, that means let this other person who has more knowledge in this area make these sort of decisions for me, or give me guidance, then that's probably a smart thing to do. But you're still in charge, because you still
Yes.
have to execute on this, and be consistent with it.
You still have to execute. And you brought up a fundamental issue that I've been seeing a lot ever since I even began to care about health at all, which was not really until about 2017 ish. And everything that I've been learning from those couple years, 2017, 18, I'm still using today. It's just like, that compounding knowledge, like you said, but it was all about executing them by myself. It wasn't like anyone could just take over and do it for me. And, you've brought up the fundamental issue is that doctors can be like drug dealers. They want you coming back over and over again. And really, like the system that you've put forth is like, all right, I'm going to show you how you can help yourself. I'll work with you for this amount of time, and then I never want to see you again. Like, go and take care of yourself. Like you've got what you came for. Now you can go and take care of yourself. And that's kind of the same way. Like people, they can't totally rely on a professional to do it for them. It's going to come back to them eventually. They're going to have to commit to something or apply what they've been absorbing and learning. And
Yeah.
that's a really cool principle there. Yeah.
Yeah, some of my clients will, get help from like weight loss drugs and things like that, which is great, right? If
Yeah.
this is a tool and it helps you achieve that result, then use it, right? In consultation with your doctor and all that. But it is not going to solve your problem. It is going to treat your symptom. And if you don't understand how to solve your problem, how to sustainably live at this certain lifestyle, then once you stop taking the medication, the benefits of the medication will wear off. You're going to gain the weight back again, and you're going to be even more frustrated. You're going to think, well, now I have to be on this medication in order to get this result, when that's not true. What you need to do is you need to learn and make a mental and emotional transformation, along with physically losing weight, and make this a sustainable. It's a cliche. It's not a diet. It's a lifestyle change, right? You need to
Yes.
make this a
Yes.
lifestyle change, and you need to evolve your self image into a higher version of yourself, right? And this is how it becomes effortless, by evolving your self image, because then you come to see yourself as someone else, right? I see myself as an Ironman athlete now. So all this stuff comes easy to me, because this is who I am now. This is what I do. It's not done through willpower. So if you can use drugs or whatever to help you achieve a goal, when I tell them, all my clients, if they have the doctors or whatever, I'm saying, that's, listen to your doctor's advice, but ask them, what's the plan to get you off this drug, right?
Right. Right. Right.
What's the long-term plan here? Is this just treating my symptoms, or can we solve this problem and then move on from it?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And, I want to zoom in on the substance for a second because let's take alcohol as the primary example here. It's probably the most popularly abused substance, and it's just like you were saying earlier too. People form their identity around that, and it's cool that the overall goal. I would love to consider myself to be an Ironman. Maybe I will work my way up to that. But like that's the way that you perceive yourself is so crucial, and then that benefits everyone around you. If you feel like you have that potential to be the proverbial Iron Man, then that's great for everyone else because then they're going to be feeding off of your energy and it's going to be a symbiotic system. But if people are wrapped up in their identity of being like, oh, I'm a social drinker on the weekends, I like to, go get drunk on Friday nights and things like that. Nothing wrong with that. I wouldn't hold it against anyone, but I know, like, for me personally, I've had to almost nearly give it up completely because it becomes a thing of dependence where it's like, all right, I want to have fun. I want to connect with folks, just like we're doing here, and have, fun conversations and build relationships. But I don't want to rely on a substance for that. And I'm curious, have you had the same experience? I think you had mentioned your relationship with alcohol. And, I'll quickly say the reason why I bring this up with such profundity is because, not gonna lie, man, like alcohol was a big factor in making my family and my childhood very what's the word, dysfunctional, right? Like without that, like my family would have been like way different, but alcohol was a huge factor in manipulating certain behaviors, getting certain reactions out of people. So like it would have transformed things. It is what it is. I'm glad that I've gone through what I've gone through, but like this is definitely a relevant issue, especially given the fact that, people bring up in 2020, people began drinking more and than ever before, perhaps. But I think people maybe want to take a second look at that. What do you think?
So I think alcohol is a very bad drug for a lot of people to use. It's a depressant. So if you are in a low energy state, it's a very bad drug to use. And you'll
Mm,
hear this given, right? Like don't ever drink when you're sad or upset.
right.
The problem is a lot of people are in a chronic low energy state. And they're in these chronic low energy states and they don't even realize it. So I've had issues with alcohol. And then I would have been in a chronic low energy state at that point, but I didn't know that. It was just, how my life was. So then it builds a really vicious cycle of you think the alcohol helps you with the anxiety because when you first have some, it does help you with the anxiety. Nothing feels better than Friday night having that first couple sips of beer and all is right with the world again for about half an hour, probably, right? Um, so it's not a good drug for people who are in a low state of energy to use. It's going to cause a lot of problems. And my relationship with alcohol now that I'm at a higher level is a lot different. I find it enjoyable to drink. It's something, the draw to keep drinking isn't nearly as strong as what it once was, right? And back in the day, if you had a couple of beers on a Saturday afternoon, it's really hard to just stop because you get severe withdrawal. And now it's not the case with me. I still feel a little bit. Don't get me wrong. A part of me would still love to keep doing it, but it's not nearly as strong of a pull. So but it's still poison, and it still doesn't make you feel good. It still has generates all sorts of very real health problems. You're not going to sleep well that night. You're going to feel off the next day. You're going to probably get dehydrated and potentially make bad food choices, and do other stupid things. So it's still not a good thing to use often. I don't think for anybody, but it can help certain people in certain situations. With anxiety on an acute level. If you have a bad day and you want to have a glass of wine and it makes you feel better, then that's great. But if every day is a bad day and then you have a bottle of wine every night, well, then that's not great anymore, and that's going to be a problem. With most things, the devil's in the dose.
Yeah, man, that's a really balanced approach, and I appreciate you bringing that up because, it's, if you're already feeling low, then why even bother, right? And it's something that can be really enjoyed and savored. I think savored is a good way to describe it. Like, the last time I ever drank wasn't so long ago. It was back on Thanksgiving, but it was a very special holiday. It wasn't celebrated like I would usually do it. And I wasn't with my family. I was with one of my close friends. We were out at a national park looking up at the Milky Way, and we had a nice bottle of I think it was like Chardonnay or something, and I hadn't drank in a long time, so I was like, I don't know if I even want to do this, but like we had been exerting a lot of energy, like hiking, climbing mountains, and we felt great. We were vibrating very high, I could say, and then like looking up at the dark skies and the Milky Way, it was like it only made it better. But if I were to go back and, after vacation had ended and just go through my day to like, if I were to do that every night, it wouldn't have been as special. So I think there's some wisdom there. And I want to ask you, if you're working with clients and you're guiding them to certain resources. It's pretty cool that we're constantly finding new material and new information and new people who put forth some cool ideas. And I had recently asked you, what are some other books on this um, Twitter thread that you might want to add? And you gave me a couple more, so I'm gonna read them again, and let's see which ones stick out to you. I think there were three of them. It said holographic universe, which I've heard of. I've never read it myself, but it looks very interesting. Which was about journeys in spectral consciousness, parallel universes of the self. And then there's also the journey of souls and destiny of souls. And I want to go back to the idea that like, we're here to enjoy this human experience. Spirituality is good to consider, but it's not the end all be all. And that's why I also want to bring up the Bible as well. I said there were three books, right? So it's
Yeah.
like looking at ancient scripture is also a great way to connect with spirituality. But perhaps, have you found, just from what you've read, because I have not dove through the entire thing in great detail, but from what I've pulled out of the Bible or the Bhagavad Gita or other texts like that, is that there's a bunch of great advice there. That's why they're so popular and why there are such powerful organizations built around them. But what are some maybe some of your favorite insights or takeaways from any of the books I had mentioned before, including the scriptures? I know that's a lot in one question, but
Yeah. So I see them all really as describing the same thing. And,
right? Yeah.
kind of like what I was saying earlier is that our human language is imprecise.
Mm.
And we use these words to try and describe ideas, but we have different perspectives. And the thing I'm trying to communicate with you might not resonate with you. So I think, for example, with the Bible, it's communicating certain messages with an intended audience that would be different than modern humans.
Mm.
They didn't know that we would exist now with our levels of science and knowledge and all these things. So this is written in a certain way by a certain group of people for a certain audience, and to that audience, I think it resonated, right, as a spiritual truth. To some people now, some people might read this and think it's just crazy, right? Or,
Mm.
it's made up. For example, you'll see imagery that God is this old white-haired guy in the sky or something like that. You'll look at that as a scientifically educated modern human and be like, well, that's preposterous, right? Obviously, there's no white-haired guy up in the sky. There's satellites, and people went to the moon and stuff, right? This doesn't exist, obviously. But what you have to understand is this was imagery that worked for a certain time and place for a certain
Mm.
group of people. Now that you have a different level of understanding, this imagery doesn't work for you anymore. This is what it was. Just this would be described to you in a different way, in a way that maybe you would understand as a human being in the 21st century, and that would be very different than the way it would have been described to somebody living 1,500 years ago, because you would have very different levels of understanding of the universe. So I really see science and spirituality on kind of the same path,
Mm.
and they're climbing different faces of the same mountain, and at the top is the same thing. And when you find people who are able to really combine these things, like Joe Dispenza, or like Dodson or Hawkins,
Mm.
right? They can take a scientific perspective and a spiritual perspective and sort of meld them, because it's all pointing at the same thing. It's just different ways of telling the same story in certain ways of talking about it might resonate with one person, whereas another way of describing it might resonate with another person. And then you'll spend years of your life arguing back and forth on the internet, but you actually have a lot of common understandings. And
Absolutely.
when
Yeah.
when you study these ancient traditions and compare them and things like that, you will find lots of of things that overlap.
Mm,
There's tons of things that overlap that have been experienced by different groups of people, in different places, in different periods of time. And it's really like there's no other explanation other than, hey, this is something, for example, like dying and seeing your life flash before your eyes,
right.
or whatever, right? This is a commonly held thing that has been documented throughout history by different groups, right? And the Greeks talk about it,
Mm,
and all these different ancient groups talk about it. So at a certain point, to say, well, maybe this is a real thing, and maybe maybe they were onto something, because I think in a lot of ways these ancient cultures were smarter than we were. They didn't have the level of scientific knowledge and understanding, but they were more connected with this greater intelligence that a lot of us, I think, are disconnected from. So in some ways, that makes them more intelligent than us, right? Maybe not in the 3D world, but in the 5D world for sure. So I think by studying this and seeing the things that we all have in common, the things that these major religions have in common, the things that science has in common, then you can start to point to some truths. And we should focus more on what we have in common than what we're going to argue about semantics wise, or okay, maybe this story in the Bible is an allegory. Maybe it's simply trying to communicate an idea to you, and you shouldn't necessarily take this literally, and
right, right.
and
Yeah, there's a funny quote on that, like the authors were brilliant and genius enough to write these stories symbolically, and we were dumb enough to take it literally. But
exactly.
it's yeah. It's fascinating to consider those parallels, right? Like I think one of my favorite parallels is the fact that each culture, whether you're all the way in India or in uh different tribes everywhere all have some kind of flood story.
Mm-hmm.
And it brings me back to this idea, kind of like Pangea, like things were all connected at one point, and then great reset happens, and then now there's a fragmented society rebuilding itself, picking itself up after being knocked over. And some people argue, if we're looking at just the US, that we're witnessing the controlled demolition or the slow, gradual collapse of this empire. They're like referring to Rome and how Rome had certain symptoms that we're seeing today before its inevitable collapse. And, as we kind of wrap up, I do want to hear about your take on what you've been seeing happening. Now, this is like not necessarily a question that is going for a particular answer. I really just want to hear, how do you process all this, because there's a number of different things happening. And one thing I'll say in particular is that while we have like, all right, I'm going to give you an example. I saw the new Marvel movie, right? The Ant-Man. And I was watching it, I was sitting there thinking, like, wow, this is a lot of war propaganda. Like, they're gearing people up to go and fight and like go through this revolution. So there's that. There's the obviously like the kinetic warfare happening in Europe, but also here there's almost like a sense of sabotage. Like it seems like something's fishy. There are a lot of various incidents. Obviously, Palestine in like the train accident is one that is quite significant in the fact that it's having a real detrimental impact on the people in that area, and allegedly this impact is spreading east and spreading out to other places, just like Chernobyl in a way. And now, even today, I'm trying to verify this all, but as far as I can tell, it is true. We've had like manufacturing plants just blowing up. We've had Miami, Florida, a lumber yard in Brooklyn, like all these different events. And this is me being conspiratorial, but it's crazy to think that part of this is just random, like random chance. Like, oh, what are the odds? Another food plant is caught on fire once again. Like, what's that all about? So, how do you process all that? What do you think of all this when you're trying to process all this all this information?
I don't really worry about any of it. I mean,
Good
it's it,
answer. Good
it
answer.
is what it is, and from the perspective I have, I can't understand if there is some sort of thing behind it, from the perspective I can't understand it, and it really doesn't serve me to worry about it, right? Maybe Klaus Schwab is plotting, world domination in Switzerland or whatever. Okay, what do you want me to do about it, right? Like, I
Right,
mean,
right.
when the fight shows up in my door, right, I'll be here and ready
Hmm.
for it. But um, I don't. This is not what I experience in my day to day
It's
life. I
good.
mean,
Yeah,
so we're obviously very connected now, and social media amplifies this connection. So these terrible things happen, and it feels like it happens close to home because
mm,
it's so it has certain emotional pulls for us, right? And the world is complicated, and yeah, there are industrial accidents, and these
right.
terrible things do happen. It's just now when they happen, you find out about it so immediately, and there's just so much you can read on social media and see videos and all this stuff, and you get inundated by it. And if you tune into it too much, well, then this is never going to end, because there's
Exactly.
always going to be something new to capture your attention, somebody else trying to like peddle anxiety at you, right? And look, obviously there's terrible things happening on planet Earth. There always have been, there always will be. The idea that Earth is supposed to be some sort of utopia is incorrect. Earth is supposed to be full of challenges.
Mm.
We are here to overcome and learn from challenges. This
Yes,
the entire point of this existence. We're never going to solve all our problems, nor should we. Because it's just that's not why we're here. So I don't worry about too much of it, and for the most part, people I see, aren't, nothing bad is happening to
it's
them.
good. Yeah, yeah.
They may be overcome by their own anxiety, but for the most part, they're happy, healthy people, right? Going
Right.
about their day-to-day business, right? With loving families, and trying to have fun and stuff like that. And this is just not newsworthy. It doesn't stand out.
Yes,
The outrageous stands out, and you can get lost in that. And I think it's important not to. So
exactly.
again, going back to social media being a mentor, being an influence, I
Hmm.
think it's important that you curate your social media feeds to make
Definitely.
sure that I have a lot of stuff muted on there. I have all the pandemic related
Good.
alerts
Oh, thank
are
God. Yeah.
muted and stuff. And this is not because I'm trying to like cover my eyes and close my ears. Like, trust me, plenty of it still gets past the mute
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
But it's like at a certain point, once I'm aware of this,
Hmm.
and
Now you can move on.
I formed opinions about it, like, I don't need more and more and more information about it. I don't need
Exactly.
to just have this inundating me all the time.
Mm.
So it's important that we choose carefully the messages that we tune into, because this is what's going to determine how we feel, and how we feel is really the most important part of health. If you feel good, and it's an actual genuine feeling good, not from like drugs or sugar or something like that.
Mm.
If you genuinely feel good, then you're healthy, right? You're doing it right. What more could you ask for?
Yeah.
And to wake up feeling good with a smile on your face, right? You're healthy. Congratulations. You're going to have some problems to work on, for sure. We all do, areas of improvement. Could
Mm.
your health be better? Of course it could. Everyone's health could be better. It's a nebulous term. But it's about really connecting with people and helping people. That's what we're here for, serving a larger purpose. And if we do that, I think I tweeted it yesterday or the other day. The key to longevity is not some health hack. It is having a purpose. If
Definitely.
you
Yeah.
have a purpose, you will hang in here for a long time. I read an article once about this woman. She works on a lobster boat in Maine. She's like in her mid 90s, and every day she gets up at 4 in the morning and she's on the boat, with the rain gear on,
Hmm.
looking at lobsters, throwing them back if they're too small, right? And she does this every day. And her son runs the boat. He's 78 years old, right? And I think we've all known kind of older people who just kind of kept this sense of purpose going.
Yes.
Then we've all known people who have just retired and died within 6 months too, because now they don't have a purpose anymore, or
Mm.
their spouse dies or something, and they die soon after. It's because you lose your purpose. So having this purpose is the most important thing. So, that's crucial, and the best purpose to have, the only worthwhile purpose to have probably is to help other people in,
Yes.
in some way, whether that is your own immediate family, whether you are a Twitter influencer with thousands of followers, right? Or you write books, or you volunteer at the local soup kitchen, or you're just, go to the local bar, and you like hanging out with your friends, and you're making them laugh, and you bring some joy to their life. This is what the good parts of the human experience are, and that's what we need to encourage more of. Stop focusing so much on the negatives.
Yes. Dude, what a cool answer, man. And like you brought it back to this central question that we should ask ourselves. You're like, well, what am I gonna do? Now, for me, I'm gonna always look at it. I'm gonna like check in on what's going on. But you brought up the core of how we can keep ourselves healthy, just like that 90-year-old woman who's catching lobsters, you know? What am I gonna do about it? Well, I'm gonna focus on my overall mission. Why am I actually here? What am I gonna accomplish today? Next year, month, whatever, that's the number one thing we can focus on. And I think you summed it up in a really profound way, and I appreciate that because people might allow social media to hijack that higher calling to some kind of purpose. And yeah, I think that's a brilliant way to frame it all. It's like, yeah, bad things are going to be happening even if you're in perfect shape and perfect health, whatever. You're still going to have to learn how to deal with challenges and obstacles, and don't get too bogged down in all of the craziness, because if we think it's crazy now, just wait, it's gonna get crazier. And what are you gonna do? You're gonna
Yeah.
keep focusing on your mission. Yeah, I love that, man, and I absolutely am thankful that Twitter, the algorithms for I would consider this a good omen that the algorithms connected us, because you're putting out really positive content. Your overall message tonight has been extremely positive and encouraging, and you invite people to be their absolute best. And I appreciate you for that, Matt. And I was curious if you had any final message to leave with folks. And I want to bring up not only do you coach, but you provide some some reading materials about losing weight and recipes, even. So, like, what would you like to share with our wonderful audience tonight before we wrap it up?
Yeah, so I offer a free fat loss guide that I wrote. Free fat loss guide for recipes too. So that's there. Um, I'm happy to give that away. If I could solve the obesity crisis just by writing like a Twitter thread, I would gladly do it, and
Yeah.
just move on with my life. I want to try to put out as much information as possible. It's my long-term goal is to help over 1 million people overcome obesity.
Mm.
So, I try to put out as much information as I possibly can, and help people overcome the same sort of struggles that I did, because I really believe that I did not overcome these things, obesity and depression and stuff like that. It wasn't just for me,
Mm-hmm.
and just so I can leave a better looking corpse, at the end of this, right? It was to help other people who are dealing with these issues, and I know there's millions of people out there who are dealing with these issues. So it's my purpose to help these people, and do what I can to help. So here I am doing that, and I love to connect with people on Twitter, especially. It's a great place for that, and just helping people out. That's what it's all about. So I'm still being patient. I'm looking to scale things up as I go, and reach more people. I'm writing a book, so there's so many ways to connect with people and scale now your message. So if you've got a good message, it's really important to get onto social media and start putting it out there, because you can reach a lot of people with that, and you can make the world a better place through that. So I recommend everybody do that, and use it for good, not evil.
Yes, exactly. We all have that innate power to influence the algorithm. So we might as well make it the absolute best. We're here for about 80, 90, 100 years. We might as well make it the absolute best. So, what a cool message, my friend. I appreciate you. It's been an awesome chat, and I'll talk to you soon.